bringing things back online or building for the first time to really help with some of that. So the goals at a very high level, the idea is by creating additional targeted incentives, we can drive rapid improvement of the Capitol Hill district in ways that have long-term benefits, like increasing local home ownership. So this plan would prioritize owner occupants. Right now, there's about 70% of those units are rentals. Helping residents afford repairs and deferred maintenance, unlocking private investment, filling what we currently have about 300 empty units just in that neighborhood. So I've come to believe when we talk about Bartlesville's housing shortage, we actually don't have a housing shortage. We have an artificial housing shortage because we have a lot of vacant properties. And so the more that those can be brought on, that dramatically decreases the amount of development that we have to be able to meet the needs of the people who are currently living here. And then investing public funds with measurable return and impact. We want to be able to tell the taxpayer and the voters and the people who live there, this is how fast this money will come back. And then finally, by making the rental market more affordable. Every new rental that comes online, because one of those 300 vacant houses becomes rentable again, is something that makes the market more affordable just naturally by increasing supply. So a lot of this is actually not, the BRT actually has a lot of opportunity within their documents to be able to do a lot of these things. This would really represent a narrowing of some of the scope of what they're working on, because we have such a smaller timeline for trying to spend these funds out, but then broadening some of the incentives. So there's essentially adding another grant opportunity that will sweeten the deal for people who are living there to make things more affordable, and then potentially to bring in investors down the line once owner occupants have had the opportunity to take advantage of it first. So we don't need to get the weeds on that. Just in general, that's what the idea of the Rebuild Capitol Hill plan is just to take this money that has been paid for by the people who live there and make sure that money goes back to them to create the highest amount of impact we can as rapidly as we can. And I think we'll have cascading positive impact over the next several years, actually.
So those are the discussions that we've had. As I said, they're all very much related. There was discussions even with the BRTA board about what function do they want to continue to serve. Not all of the board members that I've had. That what do they want to continue to serve? And I think there's a desire among the board to continue to serve in this capacity. And so this MOU and this proposal to add a different granting opportunity to Capitol Hill keeps all of that intact. It just provides a different staffing alternative. So, and with that, Mayor, I'd be happy to answer any questions you all have.
Well, there's a lot to unpack there.
Yes, sir. As I said, a lot happening in a very short period of time.
I think Councilman Kirkpatrick's made a lot of work on the idea of the rebuild of Capitol Hill and the transition work through it, with Chris stepping down to get time to step back and kind of see if there's another way that we can operate this and get the projects done that are available to us at this time with the money that city has. I do have a question. What's the 2-year limitation? Why do the funds have to be expended in?
So they don't. That was really set as a reasonable timeline, and part of the concern too is, and this is another conversation we've had with the BRTA, is that over time those funds will be eroded by the administrative expense, and so the more quickly the funds get out, the more of them will actually be put towards the project. And again, that goes back to if they hired an executive director, they knew there was a certain time horizon they were working within. With the city, we won't have those same concerns. The reality is that most of this will be reallocation of existing personnel.
And if we adopted this MOU tonight, then BRTA could modify it if there was.
They could. Then it would have to come back to the council.
Right.
So
If there was issues that they had, was it that we are maybe fully developed at this point? We don't know. Is that an option for them to?
it would be. It would slow the process, and it would give me some degree of heartburn because of the transition. So I have shared this with the board members that I have direct contact information with. I know it's been shared with Chris as well, so I'm hoping that the board's had time to consider it. I've not heard any requests or suggestions for modifications, so we're just kind of we're kind of flying as fast as we can, trying to make sure we have this in place.
And if we adopted this MOU tonight, then BRTA could modify it if there was. They could. Is that an option for them to?
We're kind of
I want to make sure that we communicate to the BRTA board that I'm not trying to jump the gun on them here being with the consideration of the MOU. I know we thought that it was likely to be able to be considered at their previous meeting,
That
but
wasn't
had
issue.
people out of town and out of pocket and those kind of things too. I mean, is it an option, or is it a reasonable thing to table it until they've had a chance to vote on it and then we could reconsider it, or is it better just for timeline?
From my perspective, because of timeline, it would be better to do it here. If we table it, then I think we would, and so initially, when Chris and I talked about it, or actually when I talked to Larry about it, he was one who was visiting with Chris about the timeline. I thought we would have to call a special meeting after the BRTA, because I didn't want to wait essentially until December. That would give us 30 days to stand up this entire operation. So I would like for the council to go ahead and give your blessings tonight. Obviously, it won't be official until the BRTA does it, but it will allow us to begin at least starting to set things up, knowing that we have council support.
Makes sense.
With the change in structure, the TIFs expired, are we essentially adopting or proposing that we adopt the structure that will exist until end of life for the BRTA?
And that's part of the discussion that has yet to be had, is does the BRTA need to have an end of life? So the TIF funds, we know that those need to be expended over a period of time, but there are some other programs that the BRTA can potentially fill. The scope obviously would be reduced without having $4 million available, but so I guess that's a question that has yet to be explored. And I think that the BRTA board should have some input on that once we're more familiar with the operations. Staff will have something to say about that, but ultimately the city council gets to decide, does this authority continue on? And so right now, like I said, there's still value in the BRTA. The board still seems to want to serve, even knowing that they would like to wrap it up, at least wrap up the TIF portion of the BRTA in the next couple of years. It's possible that if the council wanted to, the BRTA could create a different TIF for a different purpose, or could recreate TIF 1 and 2 if we want to. We just have to start over at a new baseline. So there's a lot of alternatives out there.
Right, and given the move in the legislature in Oklahoma to eliminate property tax altogether, could they then potentially transition to the use of GO bond funds?
It's possible. I don't know. Actually, I don't think it is. I don't believe that BRTA. I don't believe that an authority can use general obligation bonds. I think those are specific to the parent company.
The BRTA does have the ability to issue bonds.
They do, yes.
And they can make loans at below market value or those kind of things, but they don't have the ability to do GO bonds, at least not based on their current structure and their current documents that the city council created back in like 2004.
It would have to, but it is very similar in that what they issue is they are special tax bonds, and they're secured against the revenues of the TIF. Now, that's no longer an option because you'd just be trading dollars for dollars. You know, I'm going to go borrow $1 million when I have $1 million and want to spend it. And so now in the past, the BRTA had the option and exercised it, I believe, in the hotel TIF to actually extend financing and secure it against the revenues of the TIF. So
I don't know the answer to this question, but I'd be interested to hear from Chris. It's from the financials that I've seen, does the BRTA have any outstanding bonds or anything like that? I didn't think so.
I don't believe
You retired all that, 2009A and 2009B.
That's
are retired.
both related to the hotel TIF,
Yes.
correct? So there were two different issuances from 2009, A and B, if you all couldn't hear that, that were on there. Both of those are gone now.
As long as there's actually outstanding debt, the BRTA could not be wrapped up. It would have to all
Correct.
close first.
Correct.
So that's just a piece of the legal puzzle.
Could you, for the benefit of the public, explain how a TIP works?
Yes, sir.
And
I'll try.
some of the projects that we've accomplished within the TIP that have created the money that we've had in to the property tax.
So a TIF really works by, the first thing they do is they establish a baseline. And so you look at a geographic area, and in this case, we saw the map that had the geographic areas. You draw that boundary, and then you establish the baseline of what all of the property within that area is worth. And so once, yes, collectively. So it's called the net assessed valuation for the TIF. So once that baseline is established, then any growth above that in property tax value, we essentially capture the increment. So it doesn't create a new tax. It doesn't do anything to anyone outside of that geographic area. but it does capture the increment, hence the reason it's called the tax increment finance district. So it captures the increment goes to the authority, in this case it's the BRTA, and they oversee it based on a project plan that's adopted by the council. In this instance, we did have two separate TIFs, and I won't complicate it by talking about the others that existed as well, but those are the two primary TIFs, and they accumulated cash over time. Now, the BRTA had the ability to borrow, at least early in the TIF. You know that it's got a 20-year life, 23-year life, 25-year life, whatever it was settled on. I think this ended up being 20. It was 20, right? We didn't extend it to 5. Could have been another 5 years. So those funds can be used for that then. And so they really get reinvested back into that geographic area. Once the TIF expires, you remove it, and all of those property taxes that have been generated and captured by the increments, they go back to the taxing agency. So now that those TIFs have expired, then Washington County and Bartlesville Public Schools and the city of Bartlesville in a small manner will start to receive that increase of that property tax. So it really just sets aside any increases in property tax in a certain area for a period of time, and then it returns to you. Yes, sir. And that was exactly what it did. And I think that you can look at a lot of the improvements to downtown. Now, Chris said he'd been here 15 years. This TIF's been around, it was formed a little over 20 years ago. And you can see the change in our downtown. And it's not solely due to the TIF or the BRTA or Main Street or the city, but those were of a huge impact. So there was a lot of things that were done in redevelopment. There was a lot of things that were done with facade grants. The Hilton Garden Inn it ended up being set up a separate TIF, but those funds were used for the note that Chris was talking about. One of them, the other one was actually, I think, through the property tax. So there's been a lot of projects done in that area. We've used TIFs for other purposes. So the Bartlesville Development Authority used a TIF for Silver Lake Villages, which is the shopping center adjacent to Lowe's. So that was the funding necessary to lift that property up out of the floodplain, or no one could ever afford to develop it. We've used it to develop housing districts, and so there's Park Place and I'm trying to think of a few others. Interurban. And what was that, Chris? Wayside, yeah, Park Place over near Wayside. And then we also used it for multifamily. And so we used it specifically for the Bison Trails, Bison Trails Apartments that is out across from A&B. So that was something that had been identified in the strategic plan, was Class A apartments, so we were able to use a TIF to help incentivize that. It gets complicated because some TIFs have to be used only invested in public infrastructure. The BRTA TIFs weren't created that way, so they were able to be invested in facades and things of that nature in the actual existing infrastructure.
When we moved here a decade ago, the revitalization that has happened in the downtown business corridor has been just dramatic and really inspiring to watch. And if you talk to a lot of the business owners there, they'll tell you that Chris and the BRTA, not only is he great at helping to get that stuff done, but he has an encyclopedic knowledge of grants from all over the place. And he's helped, beyond just what the BRTA does and the TIF district does, he's helped a lot of different business owners get grants to be able to work on their building, but then that just helps like all of our downtown district be beautified and those kind of things. So it's done a lot of real good downtown. I'm excited for the good that it can do as these funds are spent.
And as far as a TIF wrap up, this is probably the only question I didn't answer that someone may have. Once the TIF district itself expired, the funds that had been received, we had a couple of choices. Either those funds could continue to be used for the programs, which is what we're at this point in time we're proposing, and they were taken for those purposes, or they're returned to the taxing jurisdictions pro rata based on what those taxing jurisdictions would have received from that. Again, at this point in time, we believe that reinvesting those funds in accordance with the TIF is the best idea, but ultimately that's a longer term decision.